The Coming Storm. The Voidborn Empire's conquest of Galaxy Sector 7 had been swift and merciless. 12 civilizations, some spanning dozens of star systems, had fallen in less than a standard cycle. The Empire's warships moved through space like a plague of metal locusts, consuming worlds and leaving only subjugated populations in their wake. Fleet Commander Nexer stood before the massive tactical display aboard his flagship, the inevitable Dominion. His six-fingered hand traced the path of conquest that had brought his fleet to the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm in this backwater galaxy. "What is our next target?" Nexer asked, his voice soft but carrying the authority that had made him the youngest fleet commander in Voidborn history. Strategic Officer Kelva approached with practiced deference. "A small blue world called Earth, Commander, inhabited by a species called humans, technologically primitive by our standards. They've barely managed to leave their own planet." Nexer's silver eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic representation of the Sol system. "Any particular strategic value?" "The planet itself is unusually resource-rich," Kelva replied, "and initial scans suggest the humans might make useful laborers. They appear adaptable and surprisingly resilient for such a fragile species." Nexer nodded. The Empire always needed new worlds to strip and new species to serve. "How long until we're in position?" 3 standard days, Commander. They won't even detect our approach until we're practically in orbit." Nexer dismissed his officer with a gesture and turned back to the display. Earth would be an easy conquest, barely worth his personal attention. But orders were orders, and the Emperor demanded that every sector be cleansed of independent civilizations. What Nexer couldn't know was that, for the first time in the Empire's 1,000-year expansion, they had grievously miscalculated. Dr. Eliza Chen was awakened at 3:17 a.m. by the shrill tone of her secure phone. She fumbled in the darkness of her apartment, knocking over a glass of water before finding the device. "Chen," she answered, voice thick with sleep. "Doctor, this is General Hammond. You need to come in. Now." Eliza sat up, suddenly alert. "What's happened?" "Something's coming. Something big. I'll brief you when you arrive. The car is already on its way." 40 minutes later, Eliza stood in the basement of the Quantum Communications Research Facility, staring at a display that shouldn't have been possible. "We detected them 6 hours ago," Hammond explained, his weathered face pale under the harsh lights. "At first we thought it was a sensor malfunction, but now we have visual confirmation from 3 deep space telescopes." The display showed what looked like a swarm of metallic insects, hundreds of ships of varying sizes, moving in perfect formation toward Earth. "How long?" Eliza asked, her mind already racing through possibilities, most of them ending with humanity's extinction. "Less than 72 hours until they reach Earth orbit." Eliza studied the data scrolling beside the main display. "Have they responded to any communications?" "We've tried all frequencies, all known mathematical sequences. Nothing." Eliza's specialty was quantum entanglement communications, specifically the theoretical possibility of sending information across vast distances instantaneously. For 5 years, her team had made incremental progress, but nothing that could be deployed. Until 3 weeks ago. "I might have something," she said quietly. Hammond turned to her, desperate hope in his eyes. "What?" "A prototype. It's not ready, not tested beyond our solar system. But it might, and I stress might, be able to send a message that they couldn't possibly ignore." "What kind of message?" Eliza took a deep breath. "The kind that changes everything." For the next 48 hours, Eliza and her team worked without rest, converting their prototype into something deployable. The president had been informed, and the world's governments were preparing for the worst. Militaries were mobilized, though everyone knew conventional weapons would be useless against visitors who had mastered interstellar travel. Humanity's only hope rested in a cramped laboratory where Eliza Chen was attempting the impossible. "The principle is simple," Eliza explained to Hammond as technicians swarmed around the hastily assembled apparatus. Quantum entanglement means that two particles remain connected regardless of distance. What affects one instantaneously affects the other. Hammond frowned. I thought that couldn't be used to transmit information. That's what we thought too. But we discovered something. Elisa pointed to a container of swirling silver fluid. This is a quantum fluid. We've managed to entangle it with similar particles that exist throughout the universe. It's like finding a universal frequency that everything is tuned to, if that makes sense. Not really, Hammond admitted. Think of it this way. We've found a way to whisper, and anything with the right ears can hear us. The question is, are they listening? As the deadline approached, final preparations were made. The device, little more than a collection of specialized equipment surrounding the quantum fluid, was ready. What exactly will this message say? Hammond asked as Elisa made final adjustments. She looked up, dark circles under her eyes. It won't be words. It will be understanding. That doesn't answer my question. Elisa stood straight, suddenly looking more confident than she had in days. It's going to show them who we really are. Aboard the inevitable Dominion, Nexer was preparing the final assault plans when Alert Officer Tren burst onto the command deck. A breach of protocol that would normally result in severe punishment. Commander, Tren gasped. Something is happening. Nexer turned, irritation evident in his stance. Explain yourself. The humans. They've somehow accessed our neural network. Impossible, Nexer snapped. The Voidborn neural network was the most secure communication system in known space, using principles of quantum mechanics that most conquered species couldn't even comprehend. Sir, look. The main display flickered, then changed. Instead of tactical data, it showed everything. Images, sounds, feelings, a torrent of information flooding directly into the ship's systems, and more disturbingly, into the neural implants of every Voidborn on board. Nexer staggered, gripping the edge of the tactical table as his mind was suddenly filled with humanity. He saw their history, their struggles, their triumphs, their failures. He felt their emotions, love, hate, fear, hope. He experienced their art, their music, their science. But most importantly, he understood what made them unique. Unlike every other species the Voidborn had encountered, humans weren't unified. They were divided by geography, by ideology, by belief. They fought among themselves constantly. But in that division, in that conflict, they had found something precious: perspective. The message wasn't just information. It was an invitation to understand. Nexer straightened, his decision already made. All ships, hold position. We need to reconsider. Part 2. A new understanding. Fleet Commander Nexer had never disobeyed an order in his 87 cycles of life. Voidborn commanders simply didn't question the Empire's directives, not if they wanted to keep their position or their lives. Yet here he was, ordering his fleet to halt their advance on Earth. Commander, Strategic Officer Kelva approached cautiously. The Emperor will demand an explanation. Nexer's silver eyes remained fixed on the view screen, which showed the small blue planet that had just appended his understanding of the universe. Did you feel it? Nexer asked quietly. Kelva shifted uncomfortably. The human transmission. Yes, it was unsettling. It was revelation. Nexer corrected. They showed us something no species has ever shown us before. Their weaknesses, their divisions. Commander, if anything, this confirms they will be easy to conquer. Nexer turned to face his officer. No, they showed us their perspective. Their ability to see through each other's eyes, to understand positions they don't hold, to empathize. With respect, Commander, empathy is weakness. Is it? Nexer gestured to the tactical display. We've conquered 1,000 worlds, subjugated hundreds of species. And what have we learned from them? Nothing. We take, we consume, we move on. The Empire has existed for 10,000 cycles, and in all that time, we've had not a single new idea. Kelva's expression darkened. This sounds dangerously close to treason, Commander. Perhaps, Nexar admitted. Or perhaps it's the most loyal thing I've ever done. Prepare a shuttle. I'm going down to the surface. On Earth, Dr. Eliza Chen stood in the middle of an emergency United Nations session, trying to explain what had just happened. The quantum transmission worked better than we expected, she told the assembled world leaders. We didn't just send them a message, we gave them access to humanity's collective experience. You mean they know everything about us now? The Russian president demanded. Our weaknesses, our military capabilities. Yes, Eliza admitted, but they also know our strengths, our diversity, our creativity, our capacity for change. The UN Secretary General leaned forward. Dr. Chen, while your initiative was bold, we have no idea how these aliens will interpret what you've shown them. You may have doomed us all. The chamber erupted in angry shouts until an aide rushed in, whispering urgently to the Secretary General, whose eyes widened. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, I've just been informed that a single ship has detached from the alien fleet and is approaching Earth. It appears to be a shuttle, not a warship. Eliza felt a surge of hope. They want to talk. The meeting location was a compromise. A military base in neutral Switzerland, surrounded by forces from a dozen nations. When the alien shuttle landed with impossible precision on the designated pad, the world held its breath. Nexar emerged alone, his tall, slender form moving with fluid grace despite Earth's gravity being slightly stronger than he was accustomed to. His silvery skin reflected the sunlight as he approached the waiting delegation. Dr. Chen stepped forward as the designated representative, chosen not for political reasons, but because she had created the connection that brought them to this moment. I am Eliza Chen, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to Earth. Nexar studied her with those unsettling silver eyes. I am Fleet Commander Nexar of the Voidborn Empire. You have changed things, Eliza Chen. How so? Your transmission, it should not have been possible. Our neural network is impenetrable. Eliza smiled slightly. We didn't break in. We found a door that was already open, quantum entanglement at a level you hadn't explored. Because we had no need, Nexar said. We take knowledge. We don't seek it. And that's why you're here now, to take our knowledge. Nexar was silent for a long moment. I am here because you showed me something no one has ever shown my people. You showed me that strength can come from division, not just unity. That understanding different perspectives creates possibilities we cannot imagine alone. He gestured to the sky, where his fleet hung like distant stars. The Empire is conquered because conquest is all we know. We are born knowing our purpose, our place. We never question, never doubt. That sounds limiting, Eliza said carefully. It is. Your species questions everything. You doubt, you argue. You see the world through 1,000 different lenses, and in doing so, you've progressed more in a few thousand years than we have in 10,000. The military leaders exchanged glances, unsure if this was a compliment or a prelude to attack. What are you proposing? Eliza asked. An exchange, Nexar said. Not conquest, not subjugation. A true exchange of knowledge and perspective, something the Empire has never done before. And what of your orders? Surely you were sent to conquer us. Nexar's expression shifted subtly. I have already disobeyed by not attacking. The Empire will send others if I return with failure. Then don't return with failure, Eliza suggested. Return with something better. The negotiations lasted 3 days. When they were complete, Nexar returned to his fleet with a proposal unprecedented in Voidborn history, a formal alliance with Earth, with both sides maintaining independence but sharing knowledge and resources. When the Emperor received Nexar's transmission, its fury was legendary. Commanders were executed, threats were made. But then, something unexpected happened. The quantum connection Eliza had established hadn't just reached Nexar's fleet. It had spread throughout the void-born neural network, touching minds across the empire. Questions were being asked that had never been asked before. Perspectives were shifting. 6 months later, Nexer returned to Earth, no longer as a fleet commander, but as the Empire's first ambassador of understanding. The Voidborn were changing, slowly but fundamentally, inspired by humanity's capacity for diverse thought. "You never planned for this, did you?" Nexer asked Eliza as they walked through the newly established Interspecies Exchange Center in Geneva. "For saving Earth with a quantum message, that was the plan," she admitted. "For changing an entire empire, no, that was unexpected." "Your species thrives on the unexpected," Nexer observed. "It terrifies us, but we're learning to see its value." Eliza smiled. "That's the thing about perspective. Once you've seen through someone else's eyes, you can never go back to seeing the world only through your own." "A dangerous idea," Nexer said. "The most powerful ones always are." As they looked up at the night sky, where ships from both worlds now traveled freely between stars, Eliza reflected on how close they had come to destruction, and how a single message, not of defiance or surrender, but of understanding, had changed everything. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't a weapon at all, but a window into another way of seeing.